Um, Today's class 20, I believe, of our 32 class structured study of Vipassana, introspective insight into the three marks of existence. And really what we're studying and developing an understanding of is the resolution of the Dhamma within each individual. Meaning this isn't a group practice at all, and it's not a faith-based practice, although the sangha is singularly important to a Dhamma practitioner. Just the interaction that occurs here. Lauren and I were talking a little bit about this too, how important just the little insights that we all share can have such a powerful effect on each other, on ending this thing that we're looking at, these current 3 weeks of fabrications. So this is our third talk on fabrications. And Lorna brought it up this morning, and Ram mentioned it Tuesday on the, I can't remember, was it the Vipassana Sutta? One, I can't remember all the names. What does the Buddha mean about this? How do you apply this teachings on fabrication? So I think we all understand what the word fabrication means. It means that we've made something up really out of nothing in relation to the Buddha's Dhamma. I mean, a metal fabricator fabricates something new out of the metal that they have. But the fabrication the Buddha's talking about is we're creating a fake view of ourselves in relation to the world based on nothing or based on false information. Remember, I think it was the third week, we studied dependent origination, and we talk often about that, what the Buddha awakened to, as described in the Anupada Sutta, that it is ignorance of Four Noble Truths that through 12 observable causative links lead to dukkha, leads to all manner of confusion, delusion, ongoing stress, and suffering. The beginning of dependent origination simply states that from ignorance of Four Noble Truths, as a requisite condition, comes fabrications. So it is because of ignorance, because of a lack of understanding of the true nature of reality as described as Four Noble Truths, that we can't help but create a fabricated view of ourselves in relation to the world. Why? Because we don't know who we are in relation to the world. That's the Buddha's description of Anatta. The Buddha used that term Anatta, a common word during his time, but in a completely uncommon way, like he did with much of the current verbiage of his time. Karma is another good example. He used that, the common word karma, in a completely different way and contradicting all the other teachings. And he did the same thing with Anatta. He used a word that the established spiritual community used as no self, or as a self that resides in something called nothingness or emptiness or other non-physical realms. And the Buddha, through his own efforts, realized that that's just a fake, fabricated view, that there obviously is not a not self, something that made Nagarjuna famous. He created a whole doctrine about that contradiction there. The Buddha never said there's no such thing as a self. He simply said that the views that we're holding of a self are false views. They're not a self. Anatta, let go of the views. And because of those views, we continue to create fabrications about ourselves in relation to the world in order to maintain those views rooted in ignorance and to continue to ignore our own ignorance. And in this sutta, the Buddha's, and it relates back to what we talked about this morning in your question Tuesday, how do we apply fabrications? And in this sutta, you'll see that the Buddha teaching us to apply fabrications first to our meditation practice itself, and then we can take it off our cushion. On one occasion, the Buddha was staying in Savatthi at Jita's Grove, Anatta Pandika's monastery. He addressed those gathered. Friends, Venerable Sariputta is wise. Sariputta is of great, deep, and penetrating discernment. For 2 weeks, Sariputta, secluded from sensuality and from unskillful mental qualities, gained profound insight into unskillful mental qualities, one after another. And that's an important distinction to make. So it relates to Ron's question in our talk this morning. How do we actually apply this? And we apply it one after another, meaning as a fabricated view arises, we recognize it and simply come back to our breathing. And in that simple, conscious, thoughtful, mindful decision to not be distracted anymore by our thoughts, we're abandoning ignorant thoughts. And it is directly that way. That's why the Buddha's Dhamma must be directly experienced. This is what he meant by ehepasiko. Come and see for yourself. That there is nothing taken on faith. I can believe all I want that I'm the world's most wonderful Buddhist and I'm doing everything perfectly well and I'm treating everybody along with whatever my moral and ethical standards are. And if I don't end ignorance, I'm still only going to continue to suffer, no matter how wonderful a person I am. And I can tell you that I am the most wonderful person. I am a pretty nice guy. And like every human being, I've suffered greatly in this life. Nobody escapes it. My problem was until fairly recently is I took all of that personally. I thought it was happening to me. I thought there was something wrong with me, or I was being punished for something, or there was something lacking in me. So anytime something didn't go my way, I continued to fabricate my own, and I'll use a strong word here, my own hateful view of myself. And why am I using such a strong view? Because for me to think that I need to add something, if there's something missing to me, takes aversion. It takes a view that there's something wrong. A strong word for that is that I hate that. So I'm using, again, that strong word to make a point that because of a wrong view, a fabricated view of myself in relation to the world, within myself, I've elevated that fabrication to the point of almost psychopathy. Do you see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. I didn't act as a psychopath. I mean, the true psychotic behavior is very rare, but it's real in the world. But there's variations on ignorance that are psychotic-like. In other words, a psychopath doesn't know the difference between reality and their own fantasies, and they believe what they say. If you're trying to slow down a little bit. If you're trying to decide if someone is a psychopath, one of the clues, not the only one, is that they cannot tell the truth about themselves and they insist on living in that lie. But we do that in a very subtle way, don't we, by our fabrications. It doesn't rise to the level of clinical psychotic behavior, but we're doing basically the same thing. And we're insisting that our life should be this way, the way that I've decided I am in relation to the world. That's a fabrication, and we cling to those. Let me continue. And we let go of them one after another, but not in an analytical way, by simply being present through a well-concentrated mind that allows us to recognize what's occurring in this moment, not lose our mind, and simply come back to what's present. Sariputta entered and remained in the first jhana. Let me go back once and I'll say that again. The reference to Sariputta, not all of you may not know who Sariputta is. Sariputta was one of the main actors throughout the Buddha's teaching career. He came to the Buddha very early in the Buddha's teaching career. He had studied with many of the same teachers, all wandering around northern India and southern Nepal at the time. And when him and his partner, Moggallana, met with the Buddha, they already had a clear understanding of what wasn't working for them, which was important. Because they met the Buddha, they listened to him, they studied with him, and within 2 weeks, Sariputta awakened. That's the Buddha's reference here. For 2 weeks, he ended fabrications one after another. So Sariputta, this is how we did it. Sariputta entered and remained in the first jhana. We talked about jhana before. Jhana are the 4 levels of meditative absorption that are taught by the Buddha and by me, simply to recognize that we are practicing right meditation. How do we know? Because our meditation is developing the way it's intended. And this is the description of that. This first jhana is characterized by rapture born of seclusion. What does that mean? The first jhana is something we all experience when we come to meditation. Whatever we're doing, we put all that aside, we find our meditation spot, we sit, we close our eyes, and we take a breath. The rapture that's referred to is that rapture in this sense means joyful engagement with what we're doing. It's joyful engagement in my meditation practice. Excuse me. And that's not something that I have to fabricate. I understand where my meditation practice is taking me. I understand why I'm doing it. And so I am joyfully engaged in something that I know that I've taken refuge in that will develop awakening just as it has in Siddhartha Gautama. This first jhana is characterized by rapture born of seclusion. This simple act that we're removing ourselves from our worldly entanglements, finding our cushion, sitting, closing our eyes, and taking a breath is what is meant by that. That's the establishment of seclusion. And Lorna pointed this out brilliantly a little while ago, that once we can establish a well-concentrated mind, seclusion on our cushion, then we're able to take that well-concentrated mind off our cushion and remain secluded from the world even while we're engaged in the world. In other words, we're in the world, but we're no longer entangled with the world or with the people of the world. We're liberated. And it begins with that first jhana. It begins with the first jhana. It begins with that simple, intentional act to establish seclusion and find your breath. That's the beginning of ending fabrications one after another. That's what the Buddha is describing here, the Sariputta is doing. We're doing it every time we sit on our cushions and every time we start integrating more of the Dhamma. This first jhana is characterized by rapture born of seclusion. It is accompanied by directed thought and evaluation. Directed thought simply means I'm directing my thought to do something. In other words, in meditation, I'm directing my thought to recognize that I'm caught up in my thought, and I direct that thought back to the sensation of breathing. There's also a level of evaluation in there, meaning we're placing a value judgment on what we're doing. And for many of us, especially beginning meditators, we're going to judge the meditation possibly harshly, like this is just too hard, I can't sit quietly. Or we'll judge the method. This is ridiculous. Whoever could have thought of forcing people to do this? This doesn't work. Let me hum a song. Let me look at a candle. Let me create an image of someone, or let me create a worship of something, or let me just think. Let me just close my eyes and think for 20 minutes and call that meditation. Of course, none of it deepens concentration. So there's a very specific practice, and that's the reason why we do it. Noticing that I am directing my thought to my breath, and noticing that I'm evaluating first, maybe not first, but more than likely it's going to be some negative view. Either I'm not doing the meditation right, or I just can't do this, whatever it might be, or the method's not right, or that crazy old guy's a big fat liar, or whatever it might be. I like something else. That's evaluation. Simply recognize that you're doing it and come back to the sensation of breathing, because all of that is one of the hindrances called doubt. That's how it manifests. It's very simple, but when we get stuck in our own thinking process, it seems almost too complicated to think our way through. We can't. Come back to the sensation of breathing. That's simply the first jhana. And as you do that, you're going to start deepening your concentration or deepening your jhana. Jhana means concentration. The qualities present in the first jhana, directed thought, evaluation, rapture, pleasure, concentration, contact, feeling, perception, intention, consciousness, desire, decision, persistence, mindfulness, equanimity, and attention were recognized one after another. In other words, he's holding Sariputta up as an example of what he's recognizing in his meditation session. He's recognizing rapture. He's recognizing pleasure. He's recognizing increasing concentration. He's recognizing contact. He's recognizing what this list is he's teaching that Sariputta in meditation is applying all the themes of the Dhamma in this simple and direct meditation method. He's noticing feelings arising, passing away. He's noticing perceptions arising and passing away. He's maintaining his intention. He's noticing the ever-changing quality of his own consciousness. He's noticing desire arising and passing away. Fabrications, ending fabrications one after another is the subtitle of this. Persistence, mindfulness, equanimity, and attention were recognized one after another. Skip ahead a little bit. Sariputta, wise, of great, deep, and penetrating discernment, clearly saw the arising, the establishment, and the passing away of all these mental qualities. All these mental qualities present in the first jhana. He noticed how these qualities arose, how they came into play, and how they vanished. Simply being mindful of it, having a mind that had a measure of concentration and could simply stay present with what was arising and passing away in his mind, in this first jhana. It sounds like an awful lot going on, almost too much to categorize or recognize. But literally what the Buddha is teaching is anything that was arising in Sariputta in this first jhana, characterized by directed thought and evaluation, meaning the other qualities, consciousness, perception, etc., he simply noticed the impermanence of them, the arising and the passing away. There is no other significance. In other words, the Buddha is not teaching that we should take a portion of our meditation and focus on consciousness, and then take a portion of our meditation and focus that meditation on feelings, and then take a portion and focus that on perceptions. That's simply manipulating and encouraging more directed thought rather than deepening concentration. Is that clear?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Good. Okay. Having entered in the first jhana, rapture born of seclusion and accompanied by directed thought and evaluation, Sariputta remained free of attraction or aversion in regards to these qualities. That's the essence of mindfulness. He was free of attraction or aversion to any of these qualities. He was simply established in that first jhana, and whatever was arising was passing away impersonally. He simply noticed it. And the importance of noticing a feeling or a perception or any of these other things mentioned, arising and passing away, is singularly significant in teaching ourselves about impermanence. Because it's not so much by noticing that if you cut a flower, it's going to wither in a few minutes. That's just an obvious fact of human life. What is most important is to recognize that our thoughts, and so our fabricated thoughts, are impermanent. They're like foam on the ocean. They're just like these feelings arising and passing away. My thoughts are just like that. They arise and pass away. And if they're fabricated, the most significant thing I can do with a fabricated thought is take a breath. Sariputta remained independent, detached, released, dissociated, and free of any barriers arising from attraction or aversion. Greed, aversion, and ongoing deluded thinking are the three defilements. So he's directly showing how Sariputta addressed and ended greed and aversion and the resulting deluded thinking. Yeah, it's a direct teaching, isn't it, Tim? Yeah. That's what you were thinking when you Did everybody hear the huh? The understanding huh? Very good. The Buddha continues. Having entered into the first jhana, Sariputta understood there is deeper concentration. He pursued this path and realized deeper concentration. Excuse me. Skip over some commentary. Sariputta, secluded from sensuality and from unskillful mental qualities, with the stilling of directed thoughts and evaluations, entered and remained in the second jhana, something we do every time we meditate. This second jhana is characterized as rapture and pleasure born of concentration. So now that joyful engagement with what I was doing has passed from simply joyful engagement with seclusion to noticing that my mind is becoming more concentrated. And that generates additional joyful or rapture, joyful engagement with what I'm doing. The significance of what the Buddha is teaching here and what I'm teaching is to recognize this. Because if we first recognize the pleasure born of seclusion, we're training our minds in that skillful desire for seclusion. And as we recognize concentration deepening, the second jhana, we're creating the inner intention to continue this deepening concentration. There are very specific and clear teachings on recognize that the Buddha is saying, recognize this feels good, seclusion. Recognize the second jhana, that your concentration is increasing. That's why he's teaching it. It's not so we grasp after rapture, the rapture of seclusion. It's so that we recognize the rapture of seclusion. It's not so we grasp after an ever deepening level of concentration. It's so that we recognize that we are developing concentration. There's a significant, and I would say a complete difference between those two things. The Buddha continues. The mind united in the body, is an important line, free of directed thought and evaluation, and internal assurance. An internal assurance. It's not an external assurance. In other words, there's not a meditation master walking around this room while we're meditating telling you you're doing it right. And why don't I do that, besides the fact that I don't want to walk around this room and do that? Why don't I do it? I spent many years in a meditation hall just outside of Woodstock, New York, where that was part of the sessions, and it was expected.
How do you know?
It was just that. It was if the form didn't look right to the meditation. I'm not putting this down. This is a well-respected and centuries-long tradition. It didn't do much for me, but the evaluation has to do strictly with form. If the meditation master felt that your form wasn't right, the inner judgment was, if the form's not right, what's inside the form can't be right. And there was a tool called the Kayasaka, which is usually made out of teak, which is a split stick that when you hit somebody with it, it claps. It doesn't hurt. I mean, they're not beating the hell out of you. And you ask permission. You give the meditation master permission to hit you when they think they should, but that's what they do. But it's strictly to adjust the form. The meditation master has no idea what's going on within me. And there's nothing where the Buddha says anything like that. He gives clear instruction, but what is left up to us is just this, to recognize that it's working. And that's what these teachings on jhana are. The qualities present in the second jhana: internal assurance, directed thought, evaluation, rapture, pleasure, concentration, contact, feeling, perception, intention, consciousness, desire, decision, persistence, mindfulness, equanimity, and attention were recognized one after another. Another significant thing about those teachings, what I just read, that list is present in every one of our meditation sessions, whether we recognize it or not. It's simply the human mind processing information. That's all it is. And that's why it's so important to recognize when we're caught up in any aspect of these subjects or themes, to simply come back to the sensation of breathing. So we might feel pretty good when we realize, oh, my mind is equanimous right now, and want to hold on to it. The best thing to do when you've developed a mind of equanimity, the final goal of meditation, of the Dhamma, what is the best thing to do when you recognize that your mind is in equanimity in the second jhana? Take another breath. Wonderful. Sariputta, wise, of great, deep, and penetrating discernment, clearly saw the arising, the establishment, and the passing away of these mental qualities present in the second jhana. He noticed how these qualities arose, how they came into play. How do these qualities come into play, by the way?
Deepening of concentration.
Yeah, I would say mindfulness, being aware that they're there. But it takes concentration to be mindful of them. And all of these qualities are simply part of every human being's life. But these particular qualities are significant to recognize that they arise and pass away. Having entered in the second jhana, rapture born of concentration and free from directed thought and evaluation, Sariputta remained free of attraction or aversion in regards to these qualities. He remained and that's a clue to what I'm about to read. He remained independent, detached, released, dissociated, and free of any barriers arising from attraction or aversion. Having entered into the second jhana, Sariputta understood there is deeper concentration. He pursued this path and realized deeper concentration. He's letting go of these fabrications one after another, going deeper and deeper into his jhana practice. Sariputta, secluded from sensuality and from unskillful mental qualities, with the fading of rapture and remaining equanimous, mindful, and alert, sensitive to pleasure in the body. It doesn't mean that we're seeking out sensual indulgence. It simply means that my mind is concentrated enough and calm enough that I could be mindful of, sensitive of what's occurring in the body. There's a significant difference between being sensitive to something and being engaged in sensual indulgence, isn't it?
Yeah.
Two different things. Okay, important. They enter and remain in the third jhana. The third jhana is characterized it's characterized by noble ones as equanimous and mindful, resting in a pleasant abiding. So we've all had that experience in meditation too, that even if it's just for a few moments, we're simply resting in equanimity, right? Everybody's had that experience. Has anyone not? That's the third jhana. You're doing it right. Sariputta, wise, of great, deep, and penetrating discernment, clearly saw the arising, the establishment, and the passing away of these mental qualities present in the third jhana. He noticed how these qualities arose, came into play, and vanished. Having entered in the third jhana, equanimous, a pleasant abiding, the qualities of concentration, sensory contact, feelings, perceptions, intentions, consciousness, desire, decision, persistence, mindfulness, equanimity, and attention were recognized one after another. Sariputta remained free of attraction or aversion in regards to these qualities. He remained independent, detached, released, dissociated, and free of any barriers arising from attraction or aversion. Having entered into the third jhana, Sariputta understood there is deeper concentration. He pursued this path and realized deeper concentration. I'm going to jump ahead a little bit. Furthermore, with the abandoning of joy and desire and distress, and with the abandoning of pleasure and pain, Sariputta entered and remained in the fourth jhana. Has every one of you experienced even a moment where you're not mindful of any pleasure or pain or seeking it out? Mm-hmm. Your mind is resting in equanimity. Mm-hmm. And notice that, and I've probably given 10 or 14, I don't know however many, teachings on jhana. There's not one that I've come across where the Buddha says, and the fourth jhana is established by remaining equanimous for 813 days, or 4 million years, or even 8 minutes. It's just to recognize that we've entered this fourth jhana. And if you understand truly impermanence and uncertainty, in order to understand impermanence, we have to understand that a moment of equanimity is just as valuable as a lifetime of equanimity. Why? Can anybody answer that question? And it's not meant to be a trick question, but
Anatta.
It's not. You're almost there. It is. That's the right answer. It's the same thing. There's just more of it to an awakened human being. We're just because our minds are more well concentrated. We're able to maintain that equanimity. Where in the
concentration gives you the understanding and allows you to have the mindfulness to remain aware of those. It's a skillful fabrication that you're creating when you're in that fourth jhana.
Yes, and a well concentrated mind is then able to maintain the skill that it's developed. That's the right word. The skill that it's developed to even establish momentarily that fourth jhana, we continue to develop that skill. And as our concentration increases and our integration of the Eightfold Path continues to deepen, that skill only becomes more powerful and effective. And equanimity continues to grow. It's just like that. So, another way of saying this is a person practicing an authentic Eightfold Path begins right where they end, if they're actually doing this. In the first meditation session that we practice, the first jhana meditation practice we develop, we're having the experience of what it's like to develop the Dhamma completely to its culmination. And that's why it's important to recognize this. That level of pure equanimity that you've all experienced in your meditation practice is the experience of ongoing equanimity of an awakened, fully mature human being. Now you know what to look for. Before we go any further, Karen and Mary, do you have any questions about what I've said so far?
No questions, John.
And do you see where I'm going with it? Make sense?
It does make sense, John.
Good. Karen?
Yeah, same thing. No, I'm good. I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. I just want to make sure no questions before I go a little further. Okay. With the abandoning of pleasure and pain, Sariputta enter and remain in the fourth jhana. The fourth jhana is characterized by the purity of equanimity and refined mindfulness. There is no evaluation regarding pleasure or pain. It's simply not exists. It's not an issue to a mind that is well concentrated and resting in equanimity. Sariputta, wise, of great, deep, and penetrating discernment, clearly saw the arising, the establishment, and the passing away of these mental qualities present in the fourth jhana. He noticed how these qualities arose, how they came into play, and how they vanished. Having entered in the fourth jhana, established in equanimity, abandoning evaluating pleasure and pain, an internal calm, and a pleasant abiding, the qualities of concentration, sensory, contact, feelings, perceptions, intention, consciousness, desire, decision, persistence, mindfulness, equanimity, and attention were recognized one after another. Notice how there's still that ongoing impermanence even in the fourth jhana. But there's in the fourth jhana, that mind is resting in equanimity, and there's no disturbance in the mind at all. And so that fourth jhana and the teaching right here is a glimpse onto what it's like to walk through the world fully mature, fully awakened. These things still arise and pass away. They simply do not create any distraction in our minds. No discernment. I mean, no disturbance in the mind. We're still living in the world, aren't we? Sariputta remained free of attraction or aversion in regards to these qualities. That's what that last line means, that reference to what I just said. He remained free of attraction or aversion in regards to these qualities. These qualities still arose and passed away within Sariputta, but they simply were of no matter at all. It was just his human thought process unfolding. Much like we talked about this a few times, our thoughts are mostly like as impersonal as our heart pumping blood through our bodies. Our mind pumps thoughts through our experience. And most of our thoughts are as impersonal as the pump doing its work. Very, very few thoughts need our attention, except we are attached to all of our thoughts and so constantly distracted. When we establish the fourth level of jhana, we're simply no longer, we've taken control of our minds. And that thinking process that is so necessary for being an alive human being is no longer the distraction that we've made it out of a fabricated view. Got that?
Yeah. Yes.
Really?
Yeah.
Because that's the Dhamma. Really, we can go now. We're done. No. Sariputta remained independent. I mean, the Buddha's talking about independent. He's not just talking about, well, he's talking about Sariputta is remaining independent of the world. That's the significance of his independence. He's not entangled in the world anymore. He remained independent, detached, released, dissociated, and free of any barriers arising from attraction or aversion. Having entered into the fourth jhana, Sariputta understood there is deeper concentration. He pursued this path and realized there is deeper concentration. So the progression here shouldn't be misleading. Now this sutta is going to go into the fabrication of non-physical speculative realms. But these realms, whether they have mystical connotations such as emptiness or nothingness or neither perception nor non-perception or infinite space or infinite consciousness, is all the same as any imaginary self-establishment. In other words, the imagining myself as being the playing center field for the Yankees is just as much of a fabricated, speculative, non-physical experience as imagining myself in the realm of nothingness. Is that clear? Mm-hmm. It's all just speculation, and the Buddha always treated it that way. It's only here after the reference to these non-physical speculative realms could have been at the beginning of this sutta. They simply aren't, but they're no more relevance because they're after the fourth jhana. In other words, these aren't something that we could consider we develop into a fifth type of jhana. There's no reference to that. They're simply to be recognized and abandoned in the same significance as these other things that we've recognized one after another and let go of. In other words, in this context, these seemingly exalted states are nothing more than another fabricated mental construct. And there's so many suttas, I would say at least half the suttas teach something very similar to this. The three suttas on dukkha first spoke of the stress and suffering, the allure and the drawback of sensual indulgence. And then they went into the difficulty and the stress and suffering of practicing and engaging in false dharmas or fabricated views. Those are such significant teachings in what the Buddha is teaching, because that was significant in his own awakening. Remember, he was distracted for 6 years by false dharmas himself. And it wasn't until he realized what it was and what it wasn't, was he able to develop his dharma, his Dhamma. I'm going to skip over some of my commentary, but this is all, my commentary here was just on how, I'm going to skip over it all completely. Let me just continue. Furthermore, Sariputta abandoned self-identification with physical form. He abandoned self-identification with external forms, with perceptions. I'm sorry, I got to read this again. Furthermore, Sariputta abandoned self-identification with physical form. Sariputta abandoned self-identification with external forms, with perceptions of aversions. Perceptions of aversions disappeared. Now Sariputta perceives a dimension of infinite space. Sariputta entered and remained in this dimension of infinite space. The qualities present in the dimension of infinite space, the perception of the dimension of infinite space, concentration, sensory contact, feelings, perceptions, intention, consciousness, desire, decision, persistence, mindfulness, equanimity, and attention were recognized one after another. The significance of that is that the Buddha put these speculative non-physical realm in this paragraph in the same context as any other speculative impermanent quality of mind.
And they're the same qualities that are arising in the first, second, and third, fourth jhana.
Yes, simply because we give it mystical names or attach some significance to it through dharmas, through religion or spirituality, doesn't make it so. It's still what the Buddha is saying. It's just as much of a speculative belief as the belief in your feelings arising and passing away, making them real. It's just to be treated in exactly the same way. And so all of these speculative realms are now, I'm not going to read all of them because it says the Sariputta went through all these different non-physical realms, recognized them as fabricated one after another, and deepened his concentration in doing so. The Buddha continues. Wait a minute. He noticed how these qualities arose, came into play, and vanished. Sariputta remained free of attraction or aversion in regards to these qualities. He remained independent, detached, released, dissociated, and free of any barriers arising from attraction or aversion. Having abandoned the perception of the dimensions of infinite space, the dimensions of nothingness, infinite consciousness, and neither perception nor non-perception, Sariputta understood there is deeper concentration. So all of these practices, or even our own internal belief that I should try to establish myself outside of this body in some type of speculative non-physical ideology, is addressed right there. The Buddha is saying that Sariputta realized that there's even deeper concentration than establishing yourself in these fabricated realms. Again, notice the context, that these are always taught within the context of they're fabricated. There's no value, there's nothing of any reality even into trying to do this. It's just a distraction. It's just a further fabrication. He pursued this path and realized deeper concentration, meaning he continued the Eightfold Path. Furthermore, Sariputta, having abandoned the perception of the dimension of neither perception nor non-perception, he entered to remain in the cessation of perception and feelings. The Buddha's just describing his deepening concentration and his deepening abandonment of fabrications. Upon this realization, the qualities of a mind arising in grasping after cessation, greed, aversion, and delusion were completely abandoned. Fully mindful of his attainment, he regarded the impermanence of all of these past qualities. He realized that all they do is arise, they become our experience, and they pass away. There's nothing of any value. It's simply they arise, they become our life experience, and they pass away. But even in the recognition of them as a life experience, there's nothing personal in there.
But John, unfortunately, when people experience traumatic things, they do affect their mind.
So it didn't last.
It does affect their mind.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, in real physical ways.
Yep.
In terms of changes in neurotransmitters and.
Yep. And what we're finding out is that change can be undone through this practice. Well, not through them. I don't think anybody's ever done a complete study of just the Buddha's Dhamma. But we do know that the research done, at least in mindfulness in general and meditation, does have a healing effect. So certainly the effects of trauma certainly affect the way we think. They condition our mind. That's the whole point of a mind rooted in ignorance and prone to fabrications will create a conditioned mind, and traumatic events condition the mind greatly. But what I've noticed is the classical definitions of stress are present in many, many people, whether they can identify one single trauma or a traumatic event, such as addiction or something like that. Simply living in the world, we create quite a conditioned response that is.
Yeah, I mean, but it is a real physical.
Oh,
change.
yeah.
I mean, it's not something you're fabricating consciously. In other words, it is actually changing.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. You bring up a good point. Just because our thoughts are fabricated doesn't mean that there's nothing there and that they don't have effect. In fact, they have an incredibly debilitating effect. It's only in the past 30 years that the medical, maybe a little bit longer, but the medical profession has realized how debilitating stress is. And they're finding that, and I think they're going to at some point say that stress is the #1 cause of disease when they truly understand it. So we know that even what the Buddha taught, dukkha occurs. It occurs in a very real way, and we contribute greatly to our stress and suffering and the internal changes it makes in our bodies because of the way we think. I mean, for years we've been taught, and there's probably some truth to it, that we can think ourselves into things like ulcer by too much worry and anger and all that kind of stuff. So there's a direct effect, a correlation between how we think and how our body responds to it. So any traumatic event is going to affect the way that we think. And so something that can gently address that and give us a way to do it in a way that we can integrate ourselves can be so helpful. That's not to say that everybody who has a traumatic issue in their life, all they have to do is meditate and they're going to be good to go. I would never say that. But it can greatly bring the effect that Mary's talking about, have an actual physical change from the physical change that our previous thoughts have brought to us. Thank you for bringing that up, Mary. Sariputta remained independent, detached, released, dissociated, and free of any barriers arising from attraction or aversion. He now understood there is no deeper concentration. Now he's just going through that whole process of realizing. He pursued this path and realized there is no deeper concentration. In other words, he took it to its culmination. If any person were to speak rightly and with skill, or to say Sariputta has attained mastery and perfection of noble virtue, noble concentration, and noble wisdom. That last is a reference to the Eightfold Path. Sariputta has attained mastery and perception of the threefold noble Eightfold Path and has attained noble release. If any person were to speak rightly and with skill, were to say Sariputta is born of the Buddha's words. Now, of course, the Buddha is not saying that the Buddha spoke and Sariputta was given physical birth. What he's saying is that the quality of Sariputta in this moment, the quality of his Dhamma practice, is born of the Buddha's words. The Buddha continues, in this way, he is the Buddha's son. I love that. He is the Buddha's offspring. Sariputta is born of the Dhamma, has become awakened from the Dhamma. His inheritance is not of worldly things. His inheritance is my Dhamma. And our inheritance is his Dhamma. It's still here today. I know you've heard me say it over and over again. The most fortunate thing in my life is when I finally came across the Buddha's Dhamma and realized that it's useful, that I can develop it and other people can. Sariputta, the Buddha continues, Sariputta, my friends, has taken the wheel of the Dhamma, set rolling by me, and keeps it rolling in authenticity, meaning maintaining the fidelity to the Dhamma. This is what was said by the great teacher. Those gathered were delighted by his words. That was the end of the sutta. Thank you all. And Sariputta would go on to be one of the most significant teachers throughout the Buddha's career. He died shortly before the Buddha passed away, some 45 years later. Let's just go around the room. Who's there? Is that Mary? Hey, Mary. Mary.
Good morning, John. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Mary. What do you think of today's sutta?
I think there's a lot in there that I want to think about, so I'll take noble silence this morning. Thank you.
I'm glad you joined us. Karen has left us. Good morning, Jen.
Good morning. So yeah, like what Mary said, there's a lot in here, but I feel like the bottom line is just pay attention and keep paying attention to, bring your mind back to what is happening. And if that is meditation, then it's your breath, while also noticing what's going on internally. And if it is off the cushion, then it's observing and paying attention to what is happening in reality, while also noticing what's going on internally. And every moment that you recognize that you're distracted by what's going on internally, bring yourself back to what's going on in the moment. And just walking us through all of the different mental qualities can be overwhelming if you try to understand what each individual mental quality really is. But I think the overall gist is just your mind has a lot going on all the time. It is capable of way more than we can really understand. Yeah. And therefore, it requires the concentration therefore it is it's easy to be distracted by any one of those mental qualities, and why concentration is so important, and why you need to always be bringing yourself back to what is happening, and why you need to always remind yourself to be gentle while you're doing that, because there's so much going on in your mind that of course you're going to be distracted. So that's what I got out of it.
It's great. Yeah, you are, until you develop concentration. And again, it's not just meditation, is it? There's something to do in meditation to end fabrications one after another, which means to recognize when you're caught up in your thinking again, come back to the sensation of breathing. That's how it's done. Thank you. Good morning, Lorna.
Morning, John. We've spoken a lot about meditation. I think what I'm sort of mindful of in meditation is that seeing the repetitive need for having a next arising. In other words, that if I sometimes concentrate on my out breath, the passing away, because I think that points you into seeing how impermanent life is and how impermanent all our feelings are, and our thoughts, and the impermanence of life, I think, is brought out in the passing away of your breath rather than the in-breath. And I think that's just a good thing, because that's what we forget, that we get wrapped up in our thoughts and we forget that they're impermanent and they're just coming and going, and you forget it.
Yeah.
So I think if you can focus on the passing away in your breath, that's always a good thing. And which brings you to the next arising, and just seeing how sometimes that we're just so reluctant to go into the next moment without an arising, so that we don't have an arising into the point that we could even get bored or something like that, because we're not thinking about anything, that's and yet we're almost frightened of being bored, like we shouldn't be bored or something like that. That's wrong, or we're not making the best of our lives and all that sort of stuff that we think about. But if you don't have another rising, that's kind of where your mind goes, but in a soft and gentle way if you're doing it on the cushion. But that's available all through your life, on the cushion, off the cushion, if you're mindful and stick to the practice. And the next arising, which is what Jen was talking about, is actually from life, not from a fabrication. There will be another arising, it's just from life, which is a correct thought, a skillful thought.
It's the right view. Thank you. You brought that up a few times. The reason why we use our breath is because of its nature. In other words, being mindful of the in-breath and the out-breath is the perfect metaphor and the perfect practical example or experience of impermanence, isn't it? It's an impermanent moment, even the thought is impermanent. But the whole experience of my life right now in this moment is through that breath, isn't it? The arising, the coming to be is the in-breath. And that's the one that most people have very little difficulty connecting with. But many, many people don't even notice the out-breath. And the noticing of the exhale, for most people, there needs to be more intention behind it than even notice it. But it's so important because the whole in-breath and out-breath is the experience of my breath in my body. Now I'm here, I'm in it. We've all had that experience. Mary talked a little bit earlier about people with trauma. People with extreme trauma get caught up in that first breath often. And they have a hard time even being mindful of the exhale. But if you think about when anything surprising or hurtful happens to us as human beings, the first thing we do is we catch our breath, don't we? That's the in-breath. That's the stress breath, isn't it? And we all have one, take a deep breath, but exhale. It's the exhale that is the de-stressor, isn't it? And it's so important to remember that moment by moment, but establish it on our cushions. And again, not to make too big of a point, but in our meditation, we're mindful of both our in-breath, sorry for the, and our out-breath. I'm not going to blow too hard on this. It's both. It's both. And it's so important because it's the whole connected breath that is the metaphor and the practical example of impermanence. Thank you. Good morning, Tim.
Good morning. If I could extrapolate a little bit on what everybody's saying, what we're all talking about, even on Tuesday, the Jhana practice on the breath.
Yep.
If I could get a little scientific, when we're breathing in oxygen, our body, our minds, the vessels need oxygen. And what are we exhaling? Poison, right? Carbon dioxide. So when we're in stressful situations, whether they be physical stress or anxiety stress, what happens? We tend to tense up. We're almost poisoning our mind. We're aggravating it further.
Yep.
When we breathe in, when I breathe in, I take that gulp of oxygen and I exhale, there's more there than you think. And we're keeping it inside from that anxiety, that tension that's there. And what Buddha's saying, is the calmness and the gentleness and the concentration allows this flow, this filtration that keeps that mind at that point where it is fresh and healthy.
Yeah.
And that's not what he's saying exactly, but scientifically that is true.
Yeah.
We need that oxygen in our bodies.
Yep.
And nobody ever made any good decisions under stress.
That's true.
So throughout my practice of concentration throughout the day, like I said on Tuesday, I'll say it again, that I'm recognizing, even if it's right after that emotional reaction of self, of the self, at least I'm recognizing it, and then getting to the other point of before the reaction, recognizing it. So there is no reaction, so that it is past.
That's it. Yeah, that's how you develop a Dhamma practice. First, you're describing how to accurately apply the Dhamma just that way. So thank you. Good morning, Ram. Do you understand a little more about what the Buddha means about abandoning fabrications?
Well, the bad news is they're all fabrications.
Yeah.
The good news is they're all
They're all
fabrications.
fabrications.
So they can all be abandoned one after the other.
Yep.
And that's the path.
That's the path. Nothing to it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Hello, Anthony.
Good morning. I thought it was really good that the Buddha coupled the fabrications with the jhanas, because it's almost like a warning, I'm saying that you need to meditate. This is really good stuff, but here's the downside of it, or here's the potential downside. And especially in a Western society where we might start looking at jhanas as goals to attain.
Yep.
I've actually even heard some people say that there are 16 jhanas. It depends, I guess, what form of Buddhism you practice.
Yeah.
But I think we could easily go looking for that. In fact, I know I hit such an intense jhana once that it felt like I was on drugs. Like I felt actually high. And for a while I wanted to try to recreate that and I couldn't.
Yeah.
So this is like the message, don't go chasing after beautiful jhanas. Just enjoy the experience. And it's actually the same, I think, with people. Sometimes people talk about awakening, like, are I awakened, or who's awakened?
Yeah.
It's the same kind of going down the rabbit hole that we have to be careful about.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Thank you for saying that. It's important to remember. Well, one of the reasons why in the past year I changed my reference to the meditation method that we do from shamatha vipassana to jhana, because it more clearly, the word itself describes why we're doing it. Is jhana means concentration. That's why we meditate, period. So that we can do these other things and recognize when we're caught up in our own speculative views. But it takes concentration. Thank you. Morning, David.
Morning.
Glad you're here. Don't run out, David, please. Hello, Kevin. Good to see you.
Good to be back. A couple of weeks away.
Yeah.
Circumstances. Yeah, it's a very deep teaching, and I think we all do see that glimmer of the fourth jhana, or the deepest thing. We've all touched it, and it does get to be sort of like a chasing of it at times. And when sometimes I do get frustrated with myself when I'm not getting there, then it gets to be that bad self-talk about, well, you didn't do it this time, but then there's a next time.
Yeah.
But just have to remember that you have to stick with the breathing in the moment, and that is the point.
It is. Thank you. Hello, Nick.
Morning, good to be here.
Good to see you.
We sing noble silence.
Glad you're here. Hello, Mary. Good to see you.
Just to be back, and I mean, I'm always intrigued by how this teaching, he put words to all these things, but there is a whole physiology behind all of it.
Yeah.
And it's the reason why it works.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. I mean, it's not. The effects are far more than just a pleasant way of thinking, aren't they? It changes everything. Glad you're here. Hello, Becky.
Hello.
Good to see you.
Thank you. It's really good to be back.
We missed you too.
I was going to just say noble silence, but what I am so happy, I mean, what I am realizing again, and it's because I was away for so long, and now I'm back, is that it is possible to live in the world without being entangled in it.
Yep.
And that is the message that came through strongly to me today. And that is what we're working toward. And it is achievable and very wonderful to know that it is achievable.
Yeah.
Especially when you've been away and you've gotten entangled again. And now maybe you haven't been, so I was traveling, so I wasn't meditating, and just to be reminded of that and actually be able to feel that is possible while you're sitting here. You can view it. You can get a glimpse of right view, which is, thank you. That's what happened for me today. And I'm glad I'm back.
I'm glad you're back too. It happens to everyone, I think. Often, even when I was meditating, it used to happen to me. It doesn't anymore. But why do you think? I don't mean to put you on a spot, but why do you think it's so difficult to meditate when you're on vacation or in a different environment, even?
It's very personal for me. Well, I mean, not personal that I wouldn't want to share it, but
I don't.
When I travel, I tend to be traveling with my husband, and it's just the two of us. And I guess he would be very happy to just go and do something for half an hour and let me meditate, but somehow I'm hesitant to ask him to do that.
Yeah.
And that's my problem, because I know he wouldn't have a problem.
Yeah. Well, that's why I asked. Thank you for the answer. And it's not unreasonable to consider another person in that situation.
Right.
I mean, really. So we can come up with all kinds of reasons why it seems like it's not a good idea to meditate today. And sometimes that's why sometimes maybe it's the kind thing to do, to be present with your partner instead of meditating. It's not it's not the end of the world.
Right.
But it does have its consequences, though, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
Yeah. And again, to make the point, it's up to us. Becky didn't do anything wrong because she didn't meditate for a couple of weeks while on vacation. But you felt the results of it.
Yes, I do. I think she needs a nun with a ruler.
I need one of those.
Yeah,
sticky things.
well, I was thinking of getting a Kayasaka. We've got to find someone. We need an enforcer. Who's it going to be? I think Michael would be a good enforcer.
Yeah, right.
Whatever you requested of me, I'll do.
And wear shoulder pads.
Yeah.
I did learn one thing that when you mentioned the stick
Yeah.
in the Protestant church, I don't know if you've ever noticed that at the beginning of the aisle, there's these two big, like they almost look like hooks, but sometimes they're
Oh, yeah,
long
yeah.
sticks. And those were for the priest or the monitors, whoever, to carry around and tap people on the head that were falling asleep during the service.
Yeah.
So that's a parallel to your staff.
So boring teachers have always been a problem. huh?
Yes, they've always been.
Thanks, Becky. Michael, good to see you this morning.
Good to see you, John. So I just wanted to just bring up one concept that was mentioned in the sutra, penetrating discernment. I just think that is such an important concept, showing like the depth of concentration needed to increase absorption. Not that we're measuring this, but also when it comes to the Eightfold Path, also, okay, discerning the very truth of each situation,
Yep.
the right, the wrong action. I just think it's, we had read this last night, Julia and myself, and that concept just like really stuck with me. It was like, when I heard it, I was like, oh my God, it's such a, it's like a laser focus to finding truth. You know,
Moment by moment.
moment by moment.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to bring that to the attention of everyone. But, I just think it's
It is. Thank you, Michael. I was going to speak on it a little bit, and I don't know why I didn't, but maybe just this. You show great insight. Another word for that might be right view, for penetrative discernment. And it simply means as life unfolds, I am able to penetrate wisely to what's occurring in this moment. What's actually occurring in the context of Four Noble Truths. I see it clearly. I'm able to penetrate through all the fabrications that were once present in my mind and see what's occurring clearly. And because I see what's occurring clearly without any me in it, my mind remains calm and at peace.
exactly the elimination or the removal of the I from the whole process of discerning the truth.
Yeah. And you know, on the surface, it seems like the great paradox, doesn't it? In order for me to be at peace, there can't be any me. But that's a real misunderstanding of what the Buddha teaches too. Certainly there's a me. It's just not the me that I thought I was. That's all. It's not annihilation at all. In fact, it's living fully. And I would say, from my own experience, living for the first time. Thank you. Julia, good to see you this morning.
Good to see you too, John. I really enjoyed the meditation today. I felt really settled and deep, you know. The stillness felt really good.
Yeah.
Kind of like, I still kind of feel that, you know, listening to the teaching of the Buddha was very, very good, very deep.
Yeah, thank you. Isn't it a wonderful place to meditate? It is. It's just everybody that came on, I mean, not everybody, but most people that came to the other place, one of the things they commented on was this place just feels nice. What a nice place. This feels even better. It's made for me. You know, it really, we're just so fortunate that, you know, how all these things came out, and we're fortunate that we have Matt's support and we're still here. But okay, I guess people coming in, it's time to close this up. So please don't forget December 12th, Thursday at 7 o'clock at Bamboo House is our holiday dinner this year. And just let me know if you're coming and how many you're bringing with you.
Do you have a ride next year? No.
What's that?
You have a ride next Saturday?
I'll work it out. Thank you. I'm gonna be able to talk to them all. I think that's it. Let's finish with metta as we always do. So find your relaxed meditative posture and just take a moment to become mindful of your in-breath and your out-breath. And these are the Buddha's words on metta from the Karaniya Metta Sutta. This is what should be done by one who is skilled in goodness and who knows the path of peace. Let them be able and upright, straightforward and gentle in speech, humble and not conceited, contented and easily satisfied, unburdened with duties and frugal in their ways, peaceful and calm and wise and skillful, not proud or demanding in nature. Let them not do the slightest thing that the wise would later reprove. Wishing in gladness and in safety, may all beings be at ease. Whatever living beings there may be, whether they are weak or strong, omitting none, the great or the mighty, medium, short, or small, the seen and the unseen, those living near and far away, those born and to be born, may all beings be at ease. Let none deceive another or despise any being in any state. Let none through anger or ill will wish harm upon another. Even as a mother protects with her life her child, her only child, so with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings. Radiating kindness over the entire world, spreading upwards to the skies and downwards to the depths, outwards and unbounded, freed from hatred and ill will. Whether standing or walking, seated or lying down, free from drowsiness, one should sustain this recollection. This is said to be the sublime abiding. By not holding to fixed views, the pure-hearted one, having clarity of vision, being freed from all sense desires, is not born again into this world. Thank you all for a wonderful class this morning. Peace. Thank you, Mary.